Hey everybody, Pastor Sullivan here at Holy Cross Lutheran Church, Kerrville, Texas. Thanks for joining me for part 3 of our topic, Papal Primacy in the Early Church, as we've been going through patristic citations on a Romanist papist website about this. If you have not watched parts 1 and 2, make sure and do so. And as always, the link to the website that we're dealing with is in the video description below. So the next group of patristic passages that this website uses to prove the primacy of the Bishop of Rome in the early church comes from Cyprian of Carthage and then one of his allies, Firmilian of Caesarea. Now, Cyprian, he got along quite well with Cornelius when he was Bishop of Rome, but he did not get along very well with Cornelius' successor, Stephen. They had 3 conflicts between the two of them, in which Cyprian demonstrates that all bishops actually share in the one chair of Peter. So the first citation is from Cyprian's work entitled Unity of the Catholic Church, and he writes, "The Lord said to Peter, I say to you, he says, that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. And to you I will give the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever things you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth, they shall be loosed in heaven. On him," Peter, "he builds the church, and to him he gives the command to feed the sheep." John 21:17. "And although he assigns a like power to all the apostles, yet he founded a single chair," or cathedra, "and he established by his own authority a source and an intrinsic reason for that unity. Indeed, the others were also what Peter was, i.e., apostles, but a primacy is given to Peter, whereby it is made clear that there is but one church and one chair. So too all the apostles are shepherds, and the flock is shown to be one, fed by all the apostles in single-minded accord. If someone does not hold fast to this unity of Peter, can he imagine that he still holds the faith? If he should desert the chair of Peter upon whom the church was built, can he still be confident that he is in the church?" Now, Cyprian here assigns primacy to Peter. Roman Catholic scholar Francis Sullivan, again in his work From Apostles to Bishops, states that Cyprian used the term in its original sense, so primacy simply meant priority. He writes, "In the fact that Christ had first given to Peter the power he later gave to all the 12, Cyprian saw a clear expression of the Lord's intention to found a church that would be built on the unity of the apostles and of the bishops who would be their successors. In this context, the one chair, which is also the chair of Peter, is the one episcopate, by whose unity the oneness of the church is maintained." Another scholar explains, "In Cyprian's mind, the legitimate bishop of every see occupied a place in the one chair which Christ inaugurated with Peter." Thus far, Francis Sullivan. No relation to yours truly, by the way. So for Cyprian, the unity of the church consists in the unity of its bishops with each other, not a unity with only the Bishop of Rome. Nor does Cyprian believe that the Bishop of Rome had more authority than the other bishops. And this is apparent and evident from those 3 conflicts that we mentioned between Cyprian and Stephen, Bishop of Rome. So let's look at these 3 conflicts. The first conflict occurred when Stephen, the Bishop of Rome, recognized 2 Spanish bishops who had been deposed for cause. Cyprian called a council in North Africa which reversed Stephen's decision. Cyprian's Epistle 67 deals with this matter, and it notes that one of the Spanish bishops, Basilides by name, went to Rome and deceived Stephen in the matter. Stephen was easily deceived because he was, quote, "placed at a distance and ignorant of what had been done and of the truth," there in Epistle 67. The second conflict centered upon the rigorist Bishop of Arles, Marcion. He refused to restore those who had lapsed during the persecution, even at the time of their deaths. He also renounced communion with other churches that restored the lapsed. Cyprian wrote to Stephen telling him that he ought to excommunicate Marcion and replace him with a suitable man if Marcion didn't repent. Now, the African churches had already called this bishop to repent, so now Cyprian calls on Stephen to remedy the situation. Cyprian writes of Marcion in Epistle 66, "Let him not so act as if he himself were to judge of the college of priests, since he himself is judged by all the priests." So in the first conflict, we see that Stephen actually undoes something that a legitimate council had done, and he made a mistake. And then also, then in the second conflict, you see that another council is simply calling upon Stephen to add his voice to theirs, since priests are judged by all the priests. Now, the final conflict between Stephen and Cyprian was then the fiercest of all, and probably the most well-known. The African church demanded that those who had been baptized by the Novatianists, a rigorous sect, be rebaptized, because they believed then that the Novatianists were outside of the church, even though they held to the same God, the same baptism, etc. Now, Stephen in Rome disagreed, citing the custom at the Church of Rome of receiving them back with only the laying on of hands. Stephen threatened to excommunicate the churches of Africa, Asia, and Palestine who disagreed with him. Cyprian held a council in North Africa and decided against Stephen's custom. Now, this is the context then of Firmilian's epistle to Cyprian, part of that which is quoted on this website in question. Firmilian writes, and this is recorded in Cyprian's letter, number 64, Cyprian's epistles, 74 rather. Firmilian writes, "Stephen boasts of the place of his episcopate, and contends that he holds the succession from Peter, on whom the foundations of the church were laid. Stephen announces that he holds by succession the throne of Peter." Now, that's the only thing from that letter of Firmilian that the website quotes. But what the compiler of these quotes fails to recognize is that Firmilian is sarcastically mocking Stephen in this epistle. His letter reveals that Stephen, his behavior has been quarrelsome, boorish, and unbecoming of a bishop. Now, he doesn't deny that Stephen holds a succession from Peter. He denies that Stephen has any authority over him whatsoever. Stephen attempted to assert Roman jurisdiction over the other bishops of North Africa on the basis of Petrine and Pauline authority, and those bishops, they told him to take a hike. So primacy clearly didn't mean authority over other bishops, even to Cyprian, who wrote about the fact that he did have primacy. So like Francis Sullivan says, primacy for Cyprian just means priority, not any sort of actual authority then. Now, the final citation on this website that deals with the authority of the Pope, or claims to them, it comes from Julius, Bishop of Rome, his letter to the Eusebians of the Eastern Church. And the Bishop of Rome writes, "The judgment concerning Athanasius ought to have been made, not as it was, but according to the ecclesiastical canon. It behooved all of you to write us, so that the justice of it might be seen as emanating from all. Are you ignorant that the custom has been to write first to us, and then for a just decision to be passed from this place, Rome? If then any such suspicion rested upon the bishop there, that is, Athanasius of Alexandria, notice of it ought to have been written to the church here. But now, after having done as they pleased, they want to obtain our concurrence, although we never condemned him. Not thus are the constitutions of Paul, not thus the traditions of the fathers. This is another form of procedure, a novel practice. What I write about this is for the common good. For what we have heard from the blessed Apostle Peter, these things I signify to you." All right, so that's the quotation on the website. And what was going on? Well, a group of bishops, which we call the Eusebians, who were a party of moderate Arians in the aftermath of the Council of Nicaea, they convened a council in the city of Tyre, and they deposed Athanasius of Alexandria from his see. The next year, they deposed Marcellus of Ancyra from his see at a council in Constantinople. Now, both of these men and other bishops also deposed by these Eusebians, they went to Rome to get Julius, the Bishop of Rome, on their side. Now, they didn't seek Rome out as a final court of appeal, though. Both sides in this dispute wanted Rome's support because it was the most important and prestigious see of the Western Church. What Julius is doing in this letter is he's chiding the Eusebians for deposing bishops of such important sees, Alexandria, and Ankara without consulting Rome. He wrote, "You should have written us all, so that a just decision could be rendered by all. Certainly you cannot be unaware that, according to custom, we must be informed in writing before a verdict can be determined." Julius wanted a Roman council to adjudicate the charges against these bishops of these important sees. Now, he didn't reserve that for himself. It was rather the Roman council that judged Athanasius and Marcellus' doctrine as orthodox. And that council at Rome also then judged that the criminal charges against them were unfounded. That's then the last quotation. It was rather not the bishop himself, but a council at Rome. With all of these that we've been talking about on this website, this method of proof texting the fathers, ultimately it mutilates them because it makes them say things that they just simply weren't saying. The idea of papal primacy and papal supremacy, it didn't even begin to develop until the time of Cyprian. And then it wasn't a primacy as Rome holds today. So to claim that these passages teach such a primacy, it's simply to read them anachronistically, violently, and irreverently. The Catholic consensus of the early church is that there was no papal primacy, as Rome teaches today. Thanks for the question. I hope this helps. We'll see you next time on ATP.